Alright, y'all, so today I wanted to do a really quick review of the 18th studio album from the Beach Boys, Carl and the Passions, So Tough, which was released in the summer, kind of springtime of 1972, and was another one of the records released on their new record label, Warner Brothers. Another thing I also wanted to mention as well is that this particular album has additions in terms of the lineup of the artists involved. In particular, you had two major people show up from another band called The Flames, which was signed under the Beach Boys record label. Their names are Blondie Chaplin and Ricky Fattar. They were kind of a South American rock band. And these two were basically kind of filled in for a lot of spots. Like some of them would fill in for Dennis, and they were just kind of added, at least for a brief period of time in the 70s, as part of the lineup for the Beach Boys. So that's why I might be saying some completely new names and things that, you know, you don't recognize before. But that being said, you may be also asking yourself, why is the album labeled under Carl and the Passions? Now, I'm kind of sporting a more updated version of the album cover, which is a kind of nice, kind of chill album cover. Shows like a red truck alongside like a beach. Pretty nice. But you may be asking yourself, including myself to my confusion, why is the band that's playing this, or at least releasing this record, is labeled under Carl and the Passions? Now, like I said, I'm not exactly sure all the details, and I could be getting this wrong, but this is allegedly due to the fact that one of the very earliest names of the Beach Boys as a band was Carl and the Passions. And this was when, Brian Wilson, Dennis, Mike Love were trying to entice Carl to join the band. And Brian kind of jokingly said, okay, we'll rename the band to Carl and the Passions. And that was just kind of, usually enticing, Carl to join the band, which of course he eventually did. And then, of course, then the band, basically what happened after that was that the band members started to play gigs. They wore Pendleton kind of shirts, and then eventually they called themselves the Pendletones. And then they released their first song, Surfin', which was kind of based on the hobby that Dennis, ironically, out of all the Beach Boys, actually surfed. And the person that released that single just labeled them as the Beach Boys without the consent of Brian or all the band members. So it's one of those really bizarre fascination origin stories of the Beach Boys. But yeah, it was one of the original early names. So I'm not exactly sure why this album was named that. I'm not sure if it's mainly because Carl maybe led this effort and maybe he wanted to kind of separate himself from the Beach Boys a little and kind of branch out and do different things. And in particular, this album definitely tries to do different things. So regardless, kind of want to get that little diatribe or that little exposition part of the video kind of out of the way, because it's pretty confusing, especially if you're a Beach Boys fan. You kind of stumble upon this album, you're like, why is it called Carl and the Passions? Well, that was most likely the reason. Now, this is a pretty nice and tight album. It's only 8 tracks long, very brief. Brian really didn't have a lot of involvement with this album. He had some involvement with Surf's Up, but like I said in my previous video, his role in the band had been really diminishing by this point. And here, he doesn't really have that much involvement. This is mainly an effort led by Carl Wilson and also some new members of the band, and some contributions from Mike Love and Dennis, of course, and Al Jardine. That being said, let's get into it. So the first track we have here is You Will Need a Mess of Help to Stand Alone. Vocals done by Carl, written in part by Brian and their manager at the time, Jack Riley. And it's not a bad track. It's an opener track, and it's not too bad. It's kind of a more rocky, bluesy kind of track that kind of comes off throughout this entire album. It's the basic content of it is really just saying that you need a lot of people to help stand yourself up and be alone, which is kind of true in certain aspects. But it's a decent track. It's got some good lyrics, and the instrumental and the rocky, like the rock kind of, bluesy kind of vibe of this entire album is very nice to hear, and the instruments are very well played. The second track is Here She Comes, which is actually done by the new members of the band. And it's got a very nice bluesy rock, kind of vibe. It feels very different from other Beach Boys records. I really like the hook and the chorus, here she comes. Like, it's pretty good. Definitely sounds like a song in the 70s. I will say it's a bit weak on the album, but it's not too bad. I will say the only big issue with it doesn't really sound like typical Beach Boys flavor kind of songs, if you will. But, that being said, it's not a bad track. It's pretty good. And then we have the next track, He Come Down, which is an effort, led by Brian Wilson, Mike Love, Al Jardine, and Mike Love mainly sings the vocals here. And this is a very religious song. It kind of talks about a lot of religious topics, Christianity. Mike Love drops some factual knowledge, or I guess spiritual advice that he's learned from his inspiration, the Maharishi Yogi. I always say he's got that guy's name wrong, but the yogi guy. I'm just gonna say that the yogi guru guy that when the band members visited his place in India, and Michael became obsessed with this transcendental meditation. This is once again the lyrics that he's kind of spouting off, talking about all those topics, and he's made similar songs in the past. I will say that I'm not the hugest fan of this song a little bit, just because it's a little bit preachy for my taste. I think some of the topics they're talking about here, it's got a very nice instrumental, and it's got a very nice groove, but the lyrics for me, it just feels like a little bit of a preachy song. There's another song that they contribute to this album I feel like is a better version of this song, but it's a little bit of a preachy song and not exactly my kind of song or taste. Then we have the next song, which is Marcella, which is a Brian Wilson effort kind of song alongside other collaborators. Carl sings the vocals, and I gotta be honest with you, this is a great song. It's got a super catchy hook and chorus. I love the Marcella. It's just a really great song and really underrated in their entire discography. It feels more kind of style, kind of Beach Boys, back to that sort of flavor, if you will. But it's really good. It's really strong. I think it's honestly, there's many arguments to be made on this album, and in general, the kind of perceived perception of this album is pretty mixed and negative, but this album is really, really solid with Marcella. I think this is a really, really good track, and I personally really like it. Then we go into side 2. We have Hold On Dear Brother. This is another song led by the new members of the band. And it's a pretty different song. I mean, it's kind of flavored like a country song. It's got those kind of country kind of instruments put into it with the guitar and the winding guitars and such. And it's kind of similar, I guess you can kind of a spiritual kind of song and lyrical content. But unlike, He Come Down, this is a better song. I generally think it. It's quite different, and it does feel very odd that it's placed on the record, because this is like really the only country kind of style song on the album. But if you kind of, separate it from the whole album experience, because this is basically a bunch of singles, it's a pretty good track. I like it personally. I really would have liked to seen the Beach Boys try more of a country style album, because I think the potential for that could have been really great. And this probably will be the closest thing we'll ever hear to it, but it's not a bad track. I like it personally. It's a really nice little country tune. And then we have Make It Good, which is mainly a Dennis Wilson song. And, he's back on the album. His contributions were put back in, thank God. Make It Good is probably his best song on this entire album. It's got a beautiful, beautiful instrumental that plays throughout, and it kind of climaxes near the end of the song. It's a beautiful song. Dennis is talking about a lot of things on this track, but making it good, making the time you spent with your partner worthwhile. It's a really great track. It's really soft. It's like a ballad, if you will, but Dennis's singing is really great and really solid, and another strength that shows how great of a songwriter he was really becoming. And from what I understand, I think this was initially a part of a solo album that he was working with another guy. I think his name was Darylin Dragon, but that kind of collapsed, so he just put his songs on the album. Regardless, great track. It's my favorite Dennis Wilson track on the album. It's probably in the top 3 of this entire project for me. And then we have All This Is That, which is another religious, I would say more spiritual song. They're not necessarily name-dropping certain people or religions. It's all just talking about spiritual feelings. But this is a better version of He Come Down, in my opinion. It's a decent track. It's got a very nice instrumental, decent chorus and hook. I wouldn't say there's anything crazy about it. I would still say overall, in the grand scheme of the album, it's kind of weak, but it's a better version of He Come Down. And then we have Cuddle Up, which is another Dennis Wilson solo track, basically, alongside with collaboration of Daryl Dragon. And this is a really good track. It's just talking about cuddling up with your partner, about love, about all those feelings, and all the things that you want to do with your partner and such. It's a pretty long song, too. It's like 5 minutes and 30 seconds. And it's got a beautiful instrumental. Dennis Wilson's singing is great. I will say that personally for me, I wasn't exactly thrilled with it, though. I feel like Make It Good is better, and it gets quicker to the point. Not saying that the singing or the instrumentation's bad here. I feel like the song kind of wanes here and there, but it's a very good emotional song and still pretty strong on the album. So to kind of give you my overall opinions, I know there's a lot of negativity towards this album, but I'm going to be honest with you, going into this record, I was kind of expecting like something really horrible, and it's not that bad. I mean, this album, so to speak, is not that bad. I think that the new members of the band are contributing more. They're kind of trying out different things and styles. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Like I said, I like the country song that's on this album. And there are also some really great, strong material here. I mean, Marcella is really good. Make It Good from Dennis. All his contributions are really good. All Is This and That is pretty solid. The title, the first track, You Need a Mess of Help to Stand Alone, is really solid. So there's some really strong material here. I think what this album really suffers from is it feels pretty unfocused. It feels like a bunch of songs just thrown together in a big bowl and just released. There doesn't seem to be a consistent theme, and certain tracks too, albeit not necessarily always a bad thing, but they sometimes tend to get away from the certain structures and songs and formulas that the Beach Boys are known for. And unfortunately, in this aspect, it kind of comes with some negative consequences. Like I said before, there's certain songs like Here She Comes, kind of a generic 70s romantic tune. But sometimes it works, like Hold On Dear Brother. I think it was a risk that was worthwhile. So I think this is a bit of a mixed bag of an album. I think if I had to compare it to like maybe something like Surf's Up has some pretty bad songs on it too, but I will say that the highlights of that album I still think are stronger than some of the tracks on this album. I think this is overall a weaker effort compared to Surf's Up, but that being said, it's also quite underrated. There's some really outstanding songs here, and I think the negative reputation's a little bit overblown, right? I don't think this is the worst Beach Boys record. Maybe I'll get some hate for saying this, but I'd rather listen to this than Smiley Smile. At least that's me personally. So it's a decent album. I think it's a strange one, though. It could have had some more consistent theming, better songs, and I still think the Carl and the Passions title that released this project is so strange, and this should have easily just been a Beach Boys record, and that's exactly what it is. I'm not exactly sure why it was changed. But yeah, that's my quick thoughts on this album. Pretty decent, but could have been a lot better, but also completely underrated. All right, hopefully you all have a good day, and peace, y'all.